top 10 mistakes that Ba-alei Keriah make, and I want to thank you all for coming. There are going to be things that you are probably somewhat more obvious, and some things that are a little bit less obvious. But these are things that, having been here for a couple of years, I've noticed that we have some excellent Ba-alei Keriah, and I've also noticed that sometimes there are regular things that we do, and we tend to overlook some of the basic rules. And so I wanted to suggest to you some of the things that you may just want to pay attention to be able to elevate the level of the Keriah. Now remember that as Ba-alei Keriah, we are charged with the sacred trust of fulfilling a mitzvah for the kahal, for the tzibur of Kriyas HaTorah. And it's our responsibility to make sure that the words are clear. It's not our responsibility to make sure everyone's listening. It's our responsibility to make sure that the words are audible. And so enunciation is key. Saying the words loudly and slowly, what we tell every bar mitzvah boy, is key. And here are we're going to learn a little bit of rules of dikduk tonight in order to help us actually facilitate the pronunciation and the cantillation and the correct way to lane a little bit better. So mistake number 10 is calling yourself a Ba-alei Keriah. So that's actually that's false dikduk. You're either a korei or you're a Ba-alei Keriah. You can't be a Ba-alei Korei, because that means the master of the reader. You're not the master of the reader. You're a master reader, which means you're a master of text or you're a reader. It's like the same thing. You're either a tokeah or you're a Ba-alei Tekiah. You can't be a Ba-alei Tokeah, right? That means you'd be the master of the person blowing shofar. So that's mistake number 1. Okay, that was a gimme. Okay, okay. So number 9, reading 2 words is 1, especially when the last letter of the first word is the same as the first letter of the second word. And this, of course, we all know, but sometimes we don't take the proper time and the effort to be able to divide the letters. Especially in Parshas Eikev, you have a whole section which has double letters. The last letter is the same as the first letter. So that's some of the examples that I give. Ki somar bilvavecha rabim hagoyim ha'ela mimeni eicha uchal lahorisham. So all too often you hear eicha uchal lahorisham, and you don't hear the 2 lamets of uchal and lahorisham. Similarly, hamasos hagedolos asher ra'u einecha. By the way, the os reish is a study unto itself. We don't have time to discuss. There's been papers written about the correct pronunciation of the os reish. According to the Sefer Yetzirah and other ancient texts, the letter reish is one of the otiot hashinayim. It's one of the teeth letters, meaning that you're supposed to utilize your tongue running off your teeth when you pronounce the letter reish. So the American or North American R is clearly not a reish. Even the Israeli reish is not a correct reish. It's more like a French reish, a trill that is run off the teeth, because that's, by definition, it's an os hashinayim. So use that as your guide if you want to be able to develop that into your repertoire. Lo suchal kalosam maher vehamam mehuma gedola ad yishamedam. You know, the Yard Scroll is very medakdek in this when it comes to Kriya Shema. If you look in the Yard Scroll Siddur, you'll find they have these vertical lines that chop up many of the words, because they say that one word can run into another and sound like 2. The poskim say that if a person recites Kriya Shema deliberately and slowly, and every word enunciates clearly, then the fires of Gehenna will be cooled off for such an individual. And that's why apparently so many Sidurim and so many people are medakdek on reciting Kriya Shema, because they know they've done enough to deserve to go to Gehenna, and they want to make sure that the fire's a little bit cooler than necessary. So but the truth is that certainly if you're laning, you should be as medakdek as you are when you're reciting Kriya Shema, if not more.
Right.
Yes.
So in the 5 examples here of the words of 2 letters run together, the one example, Ashera'u, has the dash in between. Does that affect the enunciation?
It does not. No, it does not affect. The purpose of that makaf, that letter, that hyphen, so to speak, that connects the 2 words, is to tell you that they share the same negina satam. They share one trup. Ashera'u is one trup that is a group, but At the same time, you have to enunciate both reishes. You don't get a pass to just use one reish when there's really two. Okay. Number 8, using the wrong accented syllable. Okay, of course we know that the term that's used in Hebrew is mila'el versus milara. Mila'el means where the syllable is earlier in the word, other than the last syllable, and the milara is where the accented syllable is at the end of the word. Most Hebrew words are accented on the last syllable, but that's most. That's like, I don't know what the percentage is, but there's a whole bunch of words, and there are klalei dikduk, there are rules of dikduk that dictate when a word is accented earlier or later in a word, which of course we're not going to go into now. There are so many good primers on the rules of dikduk. Many of them are printed in the back of tikkunim. When I was studying klalei dikduk, I studied a number of different texts. One of them was a text that I had in my tikkun that I had bought. It was written by the Gra, and then there was another text that was written. Some of them that are more from the medieval period are a little bit more difficult to understand because the lexicon that is employed is not universal. You're better off using a text that was authored probably in the 20th century or later in order to be able to get a more understandable set of rules. But many times, misplacing a syllable can actually change the meaning of a word, believe it or not. So here are just a couple of examples. And the first two examples are actually, both examples have to do with Rachel. Vatera Rachel ki lo yolada liYaakov. That Rachel saw that she was not giving children to Yaakov. Vatikane Rachel ba'achosa. And Rachel was jealous of her sister. Vatomer el Yaakov avali vanim. And she said to Yaakov, give me children. V'im ayin, and if not, mesa anochi. Now, what is the difference between the word meta and meta? So one is present tense and one is past tense. If you don't give me children, then I am dead, or I am going to die, is what she means to say. But if you say v'im ayin mesa anochi, then it means I died. If you don't give me children, then I've died. Now that you may want to give some kind of nice drush to that, but that's not the meaning of the text. And you've actually but now let me just say a quick little word on the rules of correcting the Ba-alei Keriah. The rules are somewhat vague. However, what's clear from the poskim is that anytime a Ba-alei Keriah says a word or a text such that the meaning through his mispronunciation has been changed, the meaning of the word or the text is changed as a result of his mispronunciation, those times you correct him. So the example that's brought down in the Mishabur and other poskim is if he says Aaron instead of Aharon, and textually you know that he's not talking about an ark, he's talking about Moshe's brother, then it's not necessary to correct him. But in an instance like this, if the Ba-alei Keriah says Mesa Anochi instead of Mesa Anochi, then I believe that it would be important to correct him. Now you may end up with a lot of confused people, and there's also a whole issue about derech eretz in the synagogue. Derech eretz in the synagogue dictates that you shouldn't have 50 people yelling at the Ba-alei Keriah, and especially not when it's a bar mitzvah boy and he's just going to get shemettered, when he's at, and this will be his last experience laning because he just was totally destroyed. So you have to be careful. You have to first of all trust the Gabayim that they know, and if the Gabay misses something, then perhaps it's better to whisper to the Gabay and have him catch up to the person who's laning instead of shouting it out, because again, we have to retain a decorum in the shul. But anyway, this, in my opinion, would be grounds for correcting the Ba-alei Keriah. Another one. Va'ani, here's the converse. Va'ani bevo'i mi padan. Va'ani bevo'i mi padan. What's the correct pronunciation? Meta. On the first syllable, not on the second syllable. Because here, Yaakov is providing a narrative to Yosef of what happened in the past. Va'ani bevo'i mi padan mesa alai Rachel. Rachel died upon me on the path, or all of a sudden on the road. So here, if you were to say mesa alai Rachel, Rachel is in the process of dying as I'm coming from Padan. Well, Yaakov's on his deathbed, so also is you're saying sheker. You're saying something that's simply not true and is not being conveyed by the psukim. Another example is the word ba'a versus ba'a. Just give me 1 second, Jonathan. Like, for example, again, with Rachel. I don't know why these examples come up with Rachel. Maybe there's something deeper here. Vayomer lahem hashalom lo, that Yaakov Avinu inquires about his uncle Lavan, and they say, how's he doing? Vayomeru shalom. They said he's fine. V'hinei Rachel bito ba'a im hatzon. So what does ba'a mean? Ba'a means she is coming. Here she comes. Right? Now, if you were to say ba'a im hatzon, it means Yaakov missed her. Yaakov, if he missed Rachel, he should have gone home right after that. So that's obviously a mistake. It's a mistake of the Ba-alei Keriah. And here's another example where you reverse it. Odenu medaber imam v'Rachel ba'a. Here's the narrative of what happened. While he's speaking to them, Rachel came. So if you see, this is really important stuff. Okay? Ba'a, meta. Okay? Yes?
Isn't the general rule wherever the trump is, like whatever letter?
I'm glad you said that. It's going to be number 7. We're going to get to number 7. The question is, isn't it true that wherever the trump is, that's where you read it from? Well, let me ask you a question, Jonathan. Take a look at the second example that I provided. Va'ani bevoimi padan. You got 2 talishas over there. Which one is the real one?
No. They all usually not it. That's very pronounced word. Usually it's the end, but if you have 2, it's at the beginning.
Right. Depends if it's a talisha gadol or a talisha katana. So we'll see. That's going to be the next one. Okay, good.
If the Ba-alei Keriah says ba'a instead of ba'a, would you correct it?
Yeah, that's what I was just talking about before you came in. I think that's worthy of correction. Yes. Okay. Okay, let's go on to number 7. Regarding the reading the trup on the wrong syllable, especially now these are the ones that are the red herrings, because people will sometimes make a mistake with these. The tlisha, whether it's tlisha gadol or tlisha katana, we'll explain. The zarka, the segol, and the pashta, and the yativ. These are always fixed in their placement on the word. Now, what's the difference between a pashta and a kadma, by the way? Anyone know the difference between the two? They look exactly the same. Adam, what's the difference? Yes, exactly right. That's very important to know. A pashta is a pause trup, and a kadma is a mishares, which leads into the next word. We'll talk about that in a moment. You have a list, by the way, in the very last page of this handout of all the malachim and all of the misharsim. So I'm just glad Adam, I'm glad you brought that up. What's the difference between a melech and a mishares? A melech is a trup that indicates that there's a pause. Sometimes it's a significant pause, and sometimes it's a slight pause. And a mishares is a trup that tells you that this word is meant to feed into the next word, because it's the way that the word is phrased, or the sentence is phrased, requires these 2 words to be together. For example, munach zakev. The munach is always a mishares, it's always feeding into the next word. But a pashta is a slight pause before. Mapach pashta is one, and then you slight pause after the pashta, and then munach zakev. So there's clearly a difference between a kadma and a pashta. So Adam, how do you recognize whether the trup is a kadma or a pashta?
Pashta is usually at the end.
Pashta is always on the last letter of the word, and the kadma is on the first letter of the accented syllable. So therefore, if you look at the kadma, it's on the mem. The little cantillation mark is on the mem, because the last syllable is the second syllable, the ma, but it's on the first letter of the accented syllable, whereas the pashta is always on the last letter, period. Yativ, yes.
Thing on that. Sometimes you see in some of the that
I'm going to get there. I'm getting there in just a second. Give me just a second. That's why I brought 2 tikkunim with me. Okay, excellent, good. You anticipated what I was going to say. Now, so that's the rule. These tamim always appear on either the last or the first letter of the word. In more precise tikkunim, when the accented syllable is different from the last or first letter, 2 symbols will be written. But on less precise tikkunim, only 1 symbol is written. Now, that's why I scrounged the base medrash to find the tikkun that I used for my bar mitzvah. Now, this is not the actual tikkun I use in my bar mitzvah. That's in Los Angeles, right? But this is the same edition, Okay? Now, it's a wonderful publishing company, and they did a great job for 40 years ago, okay? Or 50 years ago. But the reality is that you should not be using a tikkun like this today. It is not medukdak. It is not precise. There are many mistakes that were never corrected over the last 50 years. And besides which, it doesn't provide a conscientious Ba-alei Keriah with the proper truck marks to be able to know which is the accented syllable. So, for example, in a tikkun like this, they won't have two zarkas. They won't have two segols. They won't have two talishas. They won't have two pashtas. There's only one. If it's a pashta, it's on the last syllable of the word, even if that's not the accented syllable. And I've actually noticed some very seasoned Ba-alei Keriah in this shul who clearly use the kitav tikkun, and to this day mispronounce and misplace the accent on syllables because they were using this tikkun. By contrast, if you use a tikkun that's printed within the last 10 years, you'll notice that whenever there's a discrepancy between the pashta having to be on the last letter, and let's say the accented syllable is on the first syllable, there'll be two pashtas, one on the accented syllable and one on the last letter of the word. So let me... The art scroll tikkun? I don't know. I have no idea.
So for me, that's not where I was going.
Okay.
Sometimes with the pashta, when you do only have one, it is still confusing, and even some of the more medukdak ones, because it's placed almost in between the second last letter and the last letter.
Oh, you mean so you can't tell whether it's a kadma or a pashta?
But an important difference is the pashta actually is pashta is poshet. It sticks beyond the last letter.
Yes.
So if
Good.
it's in between, it's really a kadma.
Yes.
The pashta would be
All right.
right at the end.
Very, very good. Excellent. Thank you.
The other thing is that a mapach always precedes the pashta, so that's another
Not
way.
true. Not true. No. Sometimes you'll have a pashta without a mapach.
Sure.
Very, yeah. It'll happen a lot. Yes.
The old tikkun, when the old tikkun has, the old tikkun looks like the Sefer Torah, whereas the new one says.
No.
The opposite.
No. First of all, there are many different editions of the Sefer Torah. There are many different. This looks like the Sefer Torah because this is what Sofrim have used for decades too. But the newer Sofrim use other tikkunim. It's called the tikkun Sofrim V'Korim because it's the same tikkun that Sofrim use and that Ba-alei Keriah use. Okay, here. So let's just some examples. Umala uvatecha, uvatechol avadecha, uvatechol mitzrayim. So that really is in the more mikdukdak tikkuns. You see that you have two zarkas and two segols. Umala uvatecha, uvatechol avadecha, uvatechol mitzrayim. Right? That's why you have two zarkas and two segols. I've heard guys say uvatechol avadecha, uvatechol mitzrayim, right? And that's clearly not correct. And then umi pesach ohel moed lo seitzeu pentamusu is supposed to have two talishas on it because the talisha ketana is always on the last letter. So if you see two talisha ketanas, and that's why you need to know the difference between a talisha ketana and talisha gedola. I noticed, and by the way, what's another difference between a talisha ketana and talisha gedola is a talisha ketana is a mishares and a talisha gedola is a melech. So a talisha ketana leads into the next word, and a talisha gedola is a slight pause afterwards. So I advocate. I mean, obviously, this is something extra to memorize when you're preparing for the laning, and I can't tell you that I get every talisha gedola and talisha ketana right, but at one time I was conscientious enough, and I did. But you should differentiate in the way that you say it. The way I learned is that talisha ketana is talisha ketana, and a talisha gedola is talisha gedola. Some people have it reversed. They're all good. They're all valid masoras, but you just realize you should differentiate between the two. Okay. Here's another one. V'yasu es ha'efod. So I've heard guys say zahav. Right? That's wrong. That's not right. It's zahav, but it's based upon using an archaic tikkun. Okay. And in this week's parsha, kasher nishbata la'avoseinu, not kasher nishbata la'avoseinu. It's just that it's a pashta, and therefore you would see it in the old tikkun with the only the truck mark would be only on the top, when it's really the accented syllable is the base. Kasher nishbata la'avoseinu.
If you know little Hebrew, a lot of times you know how to pronounce the Rabbi if one is finished.
Right, sure, but we're a bunch of we're a bunch of foreigners to Hebrew. We learn Hebrew through going to day school, and so we rely very heavily on our text to indicate to us what the accent is. Okay, pause at the proper trup. This goes back to the Melech and the Misharis issue, especially at the Esnacht and the Sof Pasuk. Now, the Esnacht and the Sof Pasuk are the strongest pauses in any given Pasuk. So you either have to pause at the Esnachta. You have to pause both at the Esnach and the Sof Pasuk. Those are the strongest pauses, but that's not to say that they are the only pauses in a Pasuk. There are smaller pauses, such as at a Pashta, such as at a Zakef, such as at a Segol, such as at a Tevir, which is a smaller pause, such as at a Tipecha. Okay, all of these, such as at a Yesiv, all of these represent pauses. Now, sometimes when you're laning quickly, it's very difficult to demarcate the Melech and the Misharis, but it's at least important to know the difference between the two. So here are just a couple of amusing things. The story about the panda who walks in the bar, chews on a few pretzels, and then pulls out a pistol and starts shooting everyone, and then walks out. And when they arrest him, he says, well, that was my sign on my cage. It says, eats, shoots, and leaves. Right? So there, clearly, you have to know where to put the comma. Is it eats, shoots, and leaves? Or is it eats, shoots, and leaves? Okay? And another one is slow children crossing, or is it slow children crossing? Or is it let's eat grandma, or let's eat grandma? Right? So of course, and the same thing is true in the Hebrew language. You don't want to eat grandma while you're laning, so make sure you get the words right. Some examples of how it's important to pause at the right places where you can have a run-on sentence which actually mamish changes the meaning, sometimes in a sacrilegious way. Vayomer Hashem al Moshe hinecha shechevim avosecha v'kam ha'amazeh. So we know Chazal quote this pasuk, but if you were not, the Pashut shot is v'hinecha shechevim avosecha. Moshe, you're about to die. V'kam ha'am hazeh. This nation will arise up. Now, if you didn't read the trup, if you didn't pause at the Esnachta properly, the implication would be hinecha shechevim avosecha v'kam. You're going to lie down with your ancestors and then get up. Now, Chazal say that's essentially what Hashem was being miramez to Moshe, and we have other examples of, Arba'im yakenu b'mispar, that they have to afflict him with a number, and then it says Arba'im yakenu lo Yosef, and Chazal make a whole drasha that the word b'mispar from the previous pasuk means it's 39, the number leading up to 40. That's all Torah Shabbat Peh. When you're laning, you're leading Torah Shabbat, and you have to keep true to the Pashup Shot. So you have to pause and you have to say, V'kam ha'am hazeh. And then this nation is going to arise. You have to stay true to the Pshuto Shel Mikra. Next, another example. Vayomer Yosef elachav anochi meis ve'elokim. Now, if you read it like that, that would be sacrilegious. You're basically saying, Yosef says to his brothers, I'm going to die in God. Implying that God's going to die, chas v'shalom. So you have to be very careful. Another example. Vayomer Moshe, sheish me'os elef ragli ha'am asher nochi bekirbo ve'ata. That am I in the midst of the nation and in the midst of you, God? Is that what Moshe means? No, of course not, because the Esnachta over there says, I am in the midst of this nation of 600,000 people. And you, Hashem said, but if you say the word ve'ata together with the previous word, your mom is changing the meaning of the pasuk. You have to be careful. Okay, so it's, like I said, important to know the difference between a melech and a misharis. And to the Gabbai, if the Ba-alei Keriah misses a sof pasuk, then you should, in my opinion, you should correct him. Normally with trup we don't correct a Ba-alei Keriah, with the exception that if he misses a sof pasuk, you should say, lemor. You should tell him stop, right? Because many times if you do a run-on sentence, then you're changing the meaning. Okay. Number 5. This is a little bit more detailed of a discussion, applying rules for the Shvanah versus the Shvanach. Now, many people just simply never learn the rules. So, Shva is a Shva, doesn't make a difference, I'm not going to bother. It's not that hard to figure out the rules for a shvana and a shvanach. So you just need to review it a little bit, and there are other books. When I was in yeshiva, there was a phenomenal little sefer called Lashon Chaim, which I've had in my library. I've referenced literally dozens of times since then. And it was a sefer that come out that year when I was in yeshiva, like in 1980 or something. And it was a compendium of the Dikduk Rashis on Chumash, and it just basically gave you the pshat of what Rashi is telling you. You know, all those Rashis on Chumash that we skipped because they had to do with Dikduk. So he goes through each and every one and tells you this is what Rashi means to say. And in the beginning of that little book, he has the Ba-alei Dikduk, and it's really phenomenal. So it's called Lashon Chaim. I don't remember the author. I don't even know if it's still in print, but there are tons of svarim like that are available. In the back of the Kuzari, the Feldheim Kuzari, you have an appendix which goes through Ba-alei Dikduk, because Rabbi Yehuda Levi at the end of the second Ma'amar has a whole section on the beauty and the divinity even of the Hebrew language. It's perfection. Okay, so the rules in general are when a consonant contains a shava at the beginning of a word or a syllable, in general, that's the rule, is that it is a shavana. Okay? So it's not shva, it's shiva. Number B, when a consonant ends a tenua kitana, it's a shvanach. So I guess I have to just lay out the difference between a tenua gedola and a tenua kitana. Those are terms that you should be familiar with. A tenua gedola, the word tenua is a verb, is the nikud, is the not the verb, the vowel I meant to say is the vowelization of the word, because you know that the Hebrew is all consonants and we vowelize it with the nikudot. So some of the nikudot, all the nikudot are called tenuos, or more correctly, the syllable is called a tenua. When it's vowelized with a tenua gedola is when it's vowelized with a certain set of vowels, and a tenua ketana, a small syllable, is when it's vowelized by another set of vowels. And if you want, just take a look at the back, the last sheet of your handout. The 5 tenua gedola shown with the sample letter aleph and with their respective sounds are the full chirik e, the shuruk u, the tzeira a, the choilam o, the large kamatz gadol is aw. The 5 tenua ketanas are the incomplete chirik, known as the chirik chaser e, the kubutz u. So it's shorter. It's a shorter vowelization. The segol is eh. The small kamatz is ah, and the patach is bi'ah. Now, we'll talk about the kamatz. It's a special case, which we'll talk about shortly. Yes, Lenny.
A quick question. I've noticed a lot of the younger, for Mrs. Laney, their segol is pronounced like a chera, like an A.
A chera, yeah.
Yeah, chera. So I didn't.
I wouldn't correct them for that. Yeah, I wouldn't.
That happens. Okay.
Yeah, I mean, if they mess up between a tenua gedol and a tenua ketana, as long as they're in the ballpark of it, a segol is really in a truncated seira. That's really what a segol is supposed to be, right? And similarly, a chirik chaser is a truncated chirik malay. So, for example, in the word Avraham, under the aleph is a patach, so that tells you that the first syllable of that word is a tenua ketana. Is what's called a small syllable, or a short syllable. And every tenua ketana, as a general rule, ends closed. A tenua ketana ends closed, which means you close your mouth at the conclusion of that syllable. Av. Okay, there are 2 more syllables in the word Avraham. One is ra, and the other one is hum. Now, every tenua gedola ends open. Your mouth is open. So av is ketana. Ketana ends closed, so it's av. Ra is a kamatz, so it ends with it's a tenua gedola, so it ends open. Ra. The only time a tenua gedola ends closed is when it's the accented syllable. So therefore, hum is closed even though it's a tnua gedola. So therefore, the general rule is when a consonant ends or closes a tnua ketana, such as av in Avraham, you need to close it. How do you close it? With a shva nach, a resting shva. That closes out the syllable. But if or another example would be Shimon. Shim is a tnua ketana, chirik chaser. So the mem that is part of that syllable is a shva nach. It closes and comes to a rest at that consonant, shim. Shim. It's not shimmeon. It's not aviraham. It's avraham. Shimon. Okay? It's very, very simple. When you have, and what we'll talk about, but by contrast, when you have a tnua gedola that is unaccented, so then the shava that comes after it cannot close that open syllable. It is therefore part of the following syllable, and therefore it is a shava na, because it is the beginning of the following syllable. So do I give you an example? Yes. Example D for kol lecha. The word kol, right? But it's kol lecha. So ko is the first syllable. That's a tnua gedola. So therefore, by definition, it's open. It does not end with a consonant. Your mouth is open. So therefore, the lamed that comes after it is the first letter of the following syllable. So it's ko lecha. Two syllables. Ko and lecha. Not kol cha, but ko lecha. Am I making myself clear or am I confusing you? I apologize if I'm being confusing. But because ko is a cholam and it is a tnua gedola, it has to remain open at the end of that syllable. And therefore, the lamed is the beginning of the next syllable, and when you have a shva at the beginning of a syllable, it's a shvana. Does that make sense? Is that clear? It's not kol and cha, it's ko and lecha. Okay? Similarly, uvri secha. We won't talk about the special case of the vav at the beginning of the word. That's a special halacha, which I won't get into right now. But let's just use the word berisecha. There's two syllables in the word berisecha. The first syllable is beri, because that's a tnua gedol, that's a chirik malay. And the second syllable is secha. It's not bris cha, it's beri secha. Clear? Is that good? So that's the general rule, is when you have a shvana versus a shvanach. That's the most basic rule, okay? In C, we said when there are two consecutive shvas, the first is nach and the second is na. There are never two, so I don't know why I didn't give you an example for that, but I'll come up with something in a minute. Memshaltecha, right? Memshaltecha. Memshaltecha, or malkecha, right? So you have the first shva is a shva nach, and the second shva will be a shva na. That's another important rule. Two shvas could be consecutive and both be na and both be nach. There is one exception, which is in ha'azinu, which is a special case with that big letter hey, which is a little bit weird. But other than that, that's the general rule. Okay. The only time you can have two consecutive shvas that are both nach is that they're both at the very end of the word, such as vayevk. Makes it a little bit difficult to pronounce, but that's the only time you can have two shvas consecutively that are both nach, that are both resting shvas. And if the syllable is accented, the shva following a nach is a nach, even when the syllable is a tnua gedola, as I mentioned to you before, such as the word katonti. Now, there are three syllables, ka, ton, and ti. According to the rule that to is a Tnua Gedola, it really should have been Katoniti, but because the accent is on the tone, becomes a closed Tnua, even though it's a Tnua Gedola, and therefore the Shava is a Shvanach, and it's Katonti, not Katoniti. Okay? Now, the Shva is important. In most cases, don't correct the Ba-alei Keriah. Shlomi, if you've been following, and you can tell the difference between a Shvana and a Shvanach, don't correct the Ba-alei Keriah if he doesn't get it right. However, there are a couple of times when you actually change the meaning of the word when you fail to enunciate the Shvana. And my favorite example is Vayireu ha'ames Hashem, Vayaminu b'Hashem u'v'Moshe avdo. So is it Vayireu, which is what the way most people pronounce it, is they saw God, or is that they feared God? Vayireu is they feared God, versus Vayireu, which is they saw God, and that really does change the meaning. Another example that was once pointed out to me when I was in yeshiva is that in Parshas Vayetze it says Vayikas Yaakov Mishnasa. So I once, when I was a little bacher, I said Vayikas Yaakov Mishnasa. So what is Vayikas Yaakov Mishnasa? He woke up from his learning. He was sleeping on his shtender and he woke up from his Gemara, right? But it's not. It's the Vayikas Yaakov Mishnasa. He woke up from his slumber. Okay, so that changes the meaning as well. Okay, Dagesh, number 4. Dagesh, with a Dagesh or without a Dagesh. Okay, so just to review, there are two different kinds of Dagesh. There's a Dagesh Kal and a Dagesh Chazak. They serve two different purposes, and that's why the Ba-alei Diktuk differentiate between the two. The Dagesh Kal is to indicate that there are 6 letters in the Hebrew alphabet that have dual pronunciations, a hard pronunciation and a soft pronunciation. Those letters are known as the Beged Kefet letters. By the way, if you want to know another nice acronym to remember, if you want to remember what all the Tnua Gedola vowels are, remember the phrase Pituchei Chosam. Pituchei Chosam, which appears in which parsha? Who can tell me? Tzaveh, good. Pituchei Chosam, here you spell it with a yod, in Pituchei, because it's a Tnua Gedola. If you remember that phrase has, those two words have all of the Tnua Gedolas in them. Pituchei Chosam. Okay? And here, the Beged Kefet letters are letters with dual pronunciations, the soft and the hard. We in Ashkenaz only know 4 out of the 6. We're only familiar with the Beis, the Kaf, the Pei, and the Taf, and we're not even sure whether we're doing it right. We're for sure doing it wrong, but because we know that a soft Taf is not a soft, that's a Samech or a Sin, but it's not a Taf. So the Teimanim say Tha, and there's a lot of indication that it should be a Tha. There's a Tha in Arabic. There's no Tha in modern Hebrew. But for whatever reason, it's either Ta in modern Hebrew or it's Sa in Ashkenazis. But it's an interesting point, which is, if I know that the Masorah that I have is incorrect from a linguistic point of view, am I still allowed to pronounce it? The answer is yes, because once it's been adopted by a tzibor, by a kehila, that becomes by definition Lashon HaKodesh. Even if it's not the exact pronunciation the way that it was done by generations ago, but by default, since we've lost that Masorah, that becomes the tzibor's default pronunciation. So sometimes it would be even perhaps, unless a person knows bevadaut, knows absolutely certain that he has a correct Masorah, for him to use linguistic theory to make his own conclusions about what the correct pronunciation is really playing with fire, because then you don't know for sure whether you're doing the right thing, and you don't even have a Masorah to rely upon. The only thing that I would encourage a Ba-alei Keriah who's ambitious to do is to try and differentiate his ayins from his aleph, and his ches should be closer to a hey than they should be to a chaf. So a het should be really that should be the pronunciation of a het, and it's a guttural pronunciation that's very similar to a hey. and the ayin should be more guttural, so because the ayin is characterized as a consonant, not as a vowel letter like the aleph. So an ambitious Ba-alei Keriah, I would be very happy if our Ba-alei Keriah were to start doing that, because those two letter differentiations are noted in Shulchan Aruch. And the Gemara itself says that if a Baal Tefillah does not differentiate between the ayin and the aleph, ma'avirin oso, we remove him, pull him off the shtender. Now, we don't do that anymore today because as a tzibur we don't differentiate between the ayin and the aleph. But if you want to, and because we have very reliable Masoras from Sephardic and Yemenite traditions, then kol hakavod, I would be very happy for a person to do that. Okay, so the Beged Kefet letters, when one of the letters appears at the beginning of a word, it will have a dagesh kal, unless the last letter of the previous word was one of these: Aleph, Hey, Vav, Yud, or the last syllable of the previous word is open. Now, why does that make a difference? If the last syllable of the previous word was open, it means that it has an invisible Hey or Aleph. So it's the same rule. But that's rule number one. And rule number two is, and the trup from the last word is a Misharis and not a Melech. So you will always have the first letter of a word have a dagesh if it's one of the Beged Kefet letters, with the following exception where you have to fulfill two criteria. Number one, the last letter of the previous word is an Aleph, Hey, Vav, Yud, whether it's visible or invisible, plus the trup has to be a Mishares trup to connect that Aleph, Hey, Vav, Yud to the Beged Kefet letter. That's the first letter of the new word. Now, the reason it works that way is because since you have an open syllable, it flows to have a soft Beged Kefet letter. Just that's from a stylistic point of view, from the way that the mouth flows, it's easier to pronounce a soft letter after an open syllable. But when you have a closed syllable or a short pause, then you have to start with a hard letter because you're starting something anew. So some examples from the Shiras Hayam. Nachisa v'chastecha. Now normally, if a base is at the beginning of a word, it would be b'chastecha. But because there's an invisible hey at the end of the word nachisa, because it's an open syllable, nachisa, my mouth remains open. So that's why the letter vase is rafa. Nachisa v'chastecha, amzuka alta. Nehalta, again an invisible hey after the word nehalta. Ve'ozecha el neve kodshecha. So once again, the vase is a vase and not a base because the trup for nachisa v'chastecha is a mercha tipecha. The mercha is a mishares. Adam, you're following? Is this easy to understand? Okay, just want to make sure. I just want to make sure Adam gets it because Adam's our future Ba-alei Keriah. Nachisa v'chazdecha is present and future, right? Nachisa v'chazdecha, because it's a mercha tipecha, the mercha leads into the tipecha, and nehalta v'ozecha is also the mercha tipecha, right? One leads into the other. Now here's an interesting case, also from the Shira, mi chamocha, okay? So why is it mi chamocha, not mi kamocha? Because the last letter of the word mi is open, and so therefore the chaf is soft. It's a soft chaf and not a hard chaf. Mi chamocha v'elim Hashem. So then you have a kasha. Why is this one mi kamocha? The Beis Yosef asked this question in Shulchan Aruch, and the Gra comments on it as well. And this is one of those few instances where midrash affects nikud. Okay, Beis Yosef says the reason why this is an exceptional case, it really should be mi chamocha twice. Why it's mi because it's mercha tipecha, so it's a misharis leading into a melech, right? So the answer is that there was a pesel that was brought into the yam. There was an idolatrous statue that was brought into the yam, and God had to keep the sea split in His wrath, and we know that because there are two times when the Torah says, "V'hamayim lahem chamam b'minamu misum olam." The first time the word choma is written, it's written malei ches vav mem he. So it was just the wall. The water was a wall from the right side and on the left side. But towards the end of the narrative, it says v'mayim lahem choma with ches mem he without the vav. So that spells al tikri choma ela chema. That God was filled with wrath because at that moment, from Shevet Dan, there was a man named Micha who was at the very end, who brought a pestle with him. And this is an example of HaKadosh Baruch Hu's forbearance, that even when a person is carrying a getchka in Avodah Zarah, Hashem keeps the yam split. Okay? So what was the name of the man who carried the getchka? It's a much longer medrash, but his name was Micha, and eventually the story of Micha and Shoftim would be about this man. And because Micha was responsible for bringing the pesel into the Yam, it would be an insult to Hashem to have Hashem's name adjacent to Micha. And so therefore you can't say Micha Mocha Bailim Hashem and then immediately say right after Hashem's name Micha. It's an insult to HaKadosh Baruch Hu to put Micha's name after Hashem. And so therefore we changed the Micha Mocha to Micha Mocha. It's one of those interesting things that when you know diktuk, it's a fascinating medrash. It's a fascinating halacha. Okay, another example. Here you see a contrast. The first time it says Nashafta veruchacha. Once again, mercha tipecha. So it's a Basharis leading into a melech, and that's why the vase is rafa. The vase is soft. But if you take a look at the next phrase, it says Tzalalu ka'oferes. Now, Tzalalu ends open. So why isn't it Cha'oferes instead of Ka'oferes? What's the answer? What's the answer? Who can? Because it's a Pashta. And a Pashta is a Melech. So it's Tzalalu pause, Ka'oferes. And therefore, the fact that the last letter is open, is an Aleph, Hey, Vav, or Yud, does not affect and soften the Beged Kefet letter that the next word starts with. Now that's the function of a Dagesh Kal. To indicate when one of these 4 letters is soft or hard, or 6 letters is soft or hard. By the way, in some Sifrei Diktuk, there is a 7th Beged Kefet letter. Anyone know what that is? Some Rishonim count the letter Reish, because in 2 places in Tanakh, the letter Reish has a Dagesh. And they say that it's Beged Kefret instead of Beged Kefet. One is in Shmuel Aleph, I think Hari'ima, where there they say that it has a dagesh. It's very, very rare, and that's why most Sifrei Diktuk don't count the reish, but just a little tidbit of information. The dagesh chazak is to geminate. The word geminate is a grammatical term that is used very.
Does it change the pronunciation of it?
It does, yes. It makes it doesn't. No, we wouldn't have. And so, if we knew the correct pronunciation, just like we don't know the difference between a gimel and a gimel, we don't know the difference between a reish and a reish, or and a dalet and a dalet. Okay, but the dagesh chazak is to geminate or double a letter. And what that essentially means is that when you see any letter in the middle of a word that doesn't fit the rules of Beged Kefet letters, sometimes really the letter with a dot in it is a double letter. That's what geminate means. It's really, there should be 2 letters there instead of 1. And so we contract 2 letters into 1, and we put a dagesh to represent that they're really supposed to be 2 letters there. That's a double letter. And a medaktek, a person who's very careful with his miftah, with his pronunciation, will indicate by adding additional emphasis to that geminated letter, to that dagesh. That's why it's the dagesh chazak. So it will come to close the Tnua Ketana, for example, like for an example in the word tipol. Tipol is really tip-pol. There's 2 syllables. The first syllable is tip, the second syllable is pol. But you read those, that's when it's acceptable to read the 2 letters as one, because there really is only 1 letter, but you just read it as a stronger pace. Tipol, tipol. Instead of tipol, it's tipol. Right? So there's 2. So that you're closing the first syllable and beginning the second syllable with the very same letter. Is that clear? Amma. That's also a geminated mem. It's a dagesh in the mem. And you can tell it fits in with the rules of dikvuk because the word amma, has to be closed because it's a tnua ketana. So the first syllable of the word Amma is Am, and the second syllable is Ma. Amma. So therefore it's got to be a geminated mem. And Ozi, as we'll see in just a moment, that komatz under the word Ozi is a komatz katan, which is a tznuah katana. And therefore these two syllables are Oz and Z. Not O and Z, but Oz-Z. Ozi. And that's why it has to be emphasized, the letter Zayin. Okay, let's go on to rule number 3. Rule number 3, using a kamatz or a patach instead of a shva for the modifiers beis, kaf, or lamed that come at the beginning of a word. Now you know this concept. Yeah, sure. I don't think so. He's not going to change the meaning. Yeah, I don't think so. Oh yes, her maid. Yes. Yeah. Are they spelled different? Does one have a dagesh and one does not? Really? Okay. Thank you for that. I did not know that distinction. Okay. Using a kamatz or a patach instead of a shva for the modifiers of beis, kaf, and lamed, and vice versa, means that you're changing a definite article into a non-definite article, or vice versa. It means you're basically saying the instead of a, or a instead of the. And that really, in my opinion, does need to be corrected, because you're changing the meaning, sometimes quite radically, from the pshat. When you have the word ka, like ka Hashem Elokeinu, I forget. No. I forget the whole pasuk now. But it's ka Hashem Elokeinu b'chol karenu elav. Right? Kadoshem it has to be a patach. I'll give you some examples. The ka, ba, or la is a contraction of the lamed and a hey hayediyah, and the definite article hey. So if you you say le instead of la, or bi instead of ba, you're actually leaving out a very important word, which is the. So for example, if you say biderech instead of baderech, or vice versa, you're changing the meaning. Biderech means on a path, and baderech means on the path. Biyom versus bayom, you're changing the meaning of the pasuk. Biyom means on a day, bayom means on the day. So it's very important to know this. Number 2, accenting and vowelizing properly to activate the vav hahifuch. This is so important. If some people have never been yotzei kriya shema in their lives. Why is that? Because they say v'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha v'hayu hadvarim ha'eleh. So v'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha means you loved God. It's not a commandment. V'ahavta es Hashem Elokecha means you loved God. It's a narrative. You loved God. Wonderful. Sometime in your past you loved God. That's great. It's not a mitzvah though. What's the correct pronunciation? V'ahavta. Now, v'ahavta means thou shalt love God. If you say v'ahavta, then you haven't. The letter vav does not mean and. It does not mean and. The letter vav, when it comes in front of certain biblical words, is coming to activate the reversal of tense. And the rules are very specific that when you're activating the reversal of tense from past to future using the letter vav, you have to shift the accented syllable. With rare exception, you have to shift the accented syllable to the last syllable of the word. So it's ahavta, you loved. Ve'ahavta means and you loved. But ve'ahavta means you shall love. So do you see the difference? And that's why it's so important in our tefillah. If you say v'hayu, it means and they were. These words were on your heart. But if you say v'hayu, it means these words shall be on your heart. Okay? And a perfect example is from Parshas Ekev, where you have this shifting back and forth because Moshe Rabbeinu is providing a narrative. And here, he is shifting from not from past tense to future tense, which is the way that we're more used to it, but here he's shifting from future tense to past tense, which is what the Vav HaHifuch does as well. But there you have to the Vav HaHifuch, when it's changing from future to past, either has a patach or a kamatz underneath it, whereas when it's changing to past to future, it will have a shva underneath it. Okay, so Moshe Rabbeinu says va'efen. Now, what does the word efen mean without the letter vav? Efen means I shall turn. Va'efen means I turned. Va'ered, and I came down from the mountain. Va'ere, and I saw. Va'espos, and I took hold. These are all past tense. Now, if a person were to say ve'espos instead of va'espos, he's changed the meaning of the word. If he says ve'espos, he's saying, and I shall take hold. And that's clearly not what Moshe Rabbeinu was saying, because he's providing a narrative of what happened in the past 40 years ago. Va'espos means I took hold. Back then, when I brought the luchos down from Har Sinai. Va'ashlichem al shtei yadai, and I thrust them in the past from my two hands. Va'ashabereim, and I broke them. And then va'es napal, and I supplicated before God. Okay, va'es palal, va'es palel, va'es napal. And then look, there's a shift. It says in the middle of that parsha, that's why it gets so confusing. At that time, God told me, hew for yourself 2 new stones, Ba-alei Keriah, and come up to me to the mountain. Make for yourself, and this is an example of where the Vav HaHifuch changes from the past to the future. Make for yourself an ark of wood. This is one of the rare times when it's not v'asisa, but rather v'asisa. It really should be v'asisa, but because of a rule called Naso Gachor, which is very technical, we won't go into now, it's v'asisa, but it really should be v'asisa. And here it is not v'echtov, but ve'echtov. Now you just saw before, all of the verbs were va, and here it's ve. Why? Because this part of the narrative is what I'm going to do in the future. So the first part of the narrative was what Moshe Rabbeinu is saying, this is what I did, and this is where Hashem tells Moshe, in this narrative, Moshe, hew for yourself 2 stones, and I, Hashem, will write on those stones in the future tense. So therefore, this ve is not a vav hahifuch, but rather just a conjunction and. Ve'echtov. So you see the nikud, the accent, all of this makes a difference in the meaning of a word which employs the vav hahifuch, either from past to future or from future to past. So important to get these rules straight. And finally, number 1, because we're running out of time, differentiating between the kamatz gadol and the kamatz katan. Now, if you remember that list that you have on the last page of what the t'nua gedolas are and the t'nua katanas are, you know that there are 2 kamatzes. One is a kamatz gadol and one is a kamatz katan. Now, you might think, and logic would tell you, that a kamatz katan, just like you have a chirik chaser, which is the shortened version of the chirik malei, so too the kamatz katan should be a shortened version of the kamatz gadol. But surprisingly, that's not the case. The patach is the shortened version of the kamatz gadol. The kamatz katan is the shortened version of the cholam, the O sound. And therefore, when you see a kamatz katan, it's supposed to be pronounced as a short O sound, not as a short aw sound. The shortened aw sound is the ah. The shortened O sound is the aw. And therefore, one of the big mistakes, if you use mivtah Sfardit, like if you use the modern Israeli mivtah, I should say, one of the big mistakes is mistaking a kamatz katan for a kamatz gadol, and therefore pronouncing it as a patach instead of a shtickle chayla. Okay? So, for example, ozi. Ozi, let's say you're a modern Israeli, you do not say azi, you say ozi. You don't say, for the most ubiquitous word with the kamatz katan is what in the Chumash? Anyone know? What? Kol. Or korban, exactly. Kol and korban are the most ubiquitous words. if you use Mivta is modern Israeli, that's why I shouldn't call it Mivta Sfardit, because the Sfardim pronounce much better than Israelis do. But true Sfardi knows how to pronounce everything correctly. But modern Israeli is like a hodgepodge a little bit. But if you use the modern Israeli pronunciation, you still say kol. You don't say kal. You don't say karban. You say korban. Right? So that's the reason. Now, how do you tell if something is a kamatz gadol or a kamatz katan? So, if we can ascertain that the unaccented syllable is closed, then the kamatz is a kamatz katan, because the kamatz katan is for a tnua katana. So therefore, a tnua katana has to be closed by definition. And therefore, if it's a closed syllable and it's unaccented, so you know the kamatz in that syllable is a kamatz katan. So for example, vayashov, vayakom, I'm literally using the modern Israeli pronunciation. Vayashov, vayakom, korban. Those are all examples. Also, if the kamatz is an exchange of a cholam, it's also a katan. For example, kodsho should be kodesh with a cholam. So kodsho is clearly a kamatz katan. Yes, Adam.
But in the most corresponding, like in the fourth week, Rashi for Stefan, is that an exception?
Uv Rashi, that's a kamatz gadol. Rashi. Chod sheichem is a kamatz katan.
Isn't that supposed to be Rosh?
Oh, should it be Rosh? Is it kamatz katan or kamatz gadol?
I don't know why. It is.
Is he right that it is a kamatz katan? I could be wrong.
No, it's Rashi, but he's saying going to this rule, it should be Rosh, because it comes from Rosh.
Is there a shva under the aleph or not? If there's a shva under the aleph, then I believe it's a kamatz gadol. No, there's no. You're right. So maybe it is Roshei Chod Sheichem. Roshei. So there's no. It's a completely silent aleph. So maybe Adam's right. Maybe it is a kamatz katan. Right. I'm not sure. Again, it's a good question. I don't know. Chod Sheichem, Ve'ozno. These are all where the kamatz katan is a substitute for chodesh, for a cholam. Okay. Also, if it's a chatav kamatz, that's a sign it's a kamatz katan. If you have a shva and a kamatz together, then that's also a sign that it's a kamatz katan. Okay, I hope I've given you.
Question.
Yes.
It's important to me at least. That it's also only in North America that you mix two nusachim. So people is
Nuschaot.
no nusachim. It's not nuschaot. No.
Nuschaot.
Okay, doesn't matter. Because you read Havarat Faradit for A and O, but the Se is Havarat Ashkenazit. You're mixing two.
Yeah.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah. No, you're right. You're right. You have to be consistent. You have to try your best to be consistent. It's very important, Charlie. You're right. Absolutely.
For those if you're not reading in the, as you call it, the modern Hebrew or Israeli version, then there really is a difference between a kamatz katan and a kamatz gadol for those.
Absolutely, sure. Kamatz katan is closer to a cholam, and an Israeli kamatz is closer to a patach. Sure, absolutely. That was the example that I gave. Is that it's not chadsho, it's chodsho. Chodsho. Closer to a cholam. What? What, in Ashkenazis or no? Even in Ashkenazis, it's not chodisho. If it was a kamatz gadol, it would be chodisho. This is chodsho, halfway between a kamatz and a cholam. Okay. Okay. I put this together myself. So I don't know. There may be other pet peeves that you have. This is I need to get this off my chest. But I feel so much better now. But I look forward to listening to you, Lane, and I look forward to encouraging our youth to Lane. It's important. Those of you, especially those of you who are teachers, brush up on Hilchos Dikduk. Brush up on it. Even though you're excellent Ba-alei Keriah, if you're responsible for the next generation of Ba-alei Keriah. They will be looking to you to make sure that you know what a shvana is and a shvanach is. They'll be looking to you to know what's a melech and what's a mishares. They're going to be looking to you to know when a beged kefet letter is soft or when it's hard. So you have to brush up on these things because you're responsible for the legacy of Klal Yisrael.